Hello everyone and welcome. In today's video, I'm writing a Tudor-inspired adventure based on the time of Anne Boleyn in the Tower. The scene I'm writing takes place in the Armoury. Before I get into it though, I want to discuss what the Armoury is and the history of it in the Tower of London. Then I'll move into the narrative of the scene and what I plan to include, or in other words, how I will go about writing it. So the Royal Armouries go back around 700 years in the Tower of London. In July 1323, a man by the name of John Fleet was appointed keeper of the King's wardrobe, and it was his job to look after the armoury in the Tower of London. In this context, the term wardrobe isn't a literal wardrobe, or a closet if you're American. Instead, it's a term given to manage the royal expenses, and it consists of 4 parts. The first part of the wardrobe was also confusingly called the wardrobe, and this accounted for the King's general expenses, such as food, drink, medicine, heating, and the like. In other words, essential household expenses. This was the most expensive of the 4, as you can imagine. The Great Wardrobe provided clothing, furs and vestments for tournaments and other events. In those times, people wore mourning robes to funerals, so you really needed an outfit for every occasion, for you and your staff. The Great Wardrobe also included wall coverings, such as tapestries, which were big things back then. Henry VIII especially loved them and spent a small fortune on commissioning them. The chamber looked after the King's jewels and money, like a bank account or investment portfolio. He used the jewels in the chamber to raise loans. Finally, we come to the Privy Wardrobe, which was the armoury. A member of the royal household, or the keeper of the Privy Wardrobe, looked after it. Their responsibility was to procure, store and distribute weapons. In the mid-15th century, the Office of Ordnance and Office of Armoury replaced the Privy Wardrobe. The Office of Ordnance focused on cannons, handguns, bows and arrows, while the Office of Armoury included edge weapons and armour. Later though, the Office of Ordnance absorbed the Office of Armoury. I think this happened in around 1671. All of this information gives us an idea of what a typical armoury would contain, and we could have some fun with enchanted armour or weapons rigged to backfire. But maybe that's a bit too mean. Because I'm writing a story-first approach, I need to work out what the purpose the armoury room serves in my game. Is it a hostile environment designed to put the players in their paces and give them an idea of what's to come? Or is it a place to rest and gain weapons that could benefit them as they delve further into the tower? Now I've chosen the latter, as I want to offer my players some help. However, I also want to insert some danger. This is a royal tower after all, and our players were not invited. But first things first, I want to get an idea of the armoury size. I think I'll go 40 by 40 feet, so that there is enough room for weapons and people. When I think of the armoury's function, it has to hold weapons and all of the soldiers who would be using them, if they were called or rushed to arms. Now, as I'm thinking of making this room a bit more of a safe room, I don't want to bring in too much danger, but I want a bit to keep up the pace and excitement. As the players enter the room, it is well lit, with torches blazing in each corner. A candle chandelier hangs in the middle. It's perfectly still. Because the room is well lit, the players can see the door to the next room ahead of them at the opposite end. However, sleeping next to this door is another Hellhound, which is gently snoring in the background. As soon as the door closes behind them, a bird begins to chirp. The chirping gets louder every round. What will they do? PCs with a passive perception of 14 will hear a quiet chirping immediately upon entering the armoury, which gets louder as time passes. The chirping originates from a bird shaped like a falcon on a plaque above the door. Behind it is a Tudor rose. Someone has enchanted the bird to rouse when our PCs enter the room. To stop the bird from chirping, they need to catch it and hold it in their hands. If the chirping isn't stopped within 3 minutes or a few rounds of exploring, the Hellhound awakens. I'm leaving it up to the GM to determine how and when the bird gets louder, but my advice is to make it quick, as it's supposed to cause a bit of anxiety from a time pressure point of view. Now, the Hellhound awakening isn't too much of a big deal if they have retrieved the Hellhound flute from Jonesy, but they'll get into a lot of trouble if they don't have that. There are ladders and other objects players can use to climb up to the bird, but if they fail to do this within a few minutes of real-time play, the bird takes flight, and the GM rolls 2 d20s to determine where it flies to. So the first d20 means left or right, the second is up or down. Next, the GM rolls a d4 for direction. An odd roll is either left or down, and an even roll is up or right. If the players don't catch the bird after it's taken flight, the GM rolls another d20. Below 10, the bird stays put. Above 10, it takes flight again, and a GM repeats those rolls he did before to determine where it moves to. When the players catch the bird, it speaks to them, and they have to solve the following riddle. Now, I'll make up my own riddle as time goes on, but in the meantime, I got this from dndspeak.com, which I'll link to below. The riddle says, no warning of timber could have stopped the drop in petals. The bird keeps repeating this until it is solved. Do any of you know what the answer is? Leave your answers below in the comments and I'll let you know if you are right. So, once a riddle is solved, the bird flies off and lands on what looks like a frame of a boarded up window. However, the window slats creak open to reveal a garnet ring of fire resistance. I might regret adding that ring, but we'll see. With it is a note. It reads, Anne's fate has been sealed. The executioner arrived in England 5 days ago from France. If she is not saved, she'll die within the week by the executioner's sword. You're her only hope. Oh, the pressure is on now. So, just to recap, in the armoury, there is a snoozing hellhound. Well, we've hoped they stayed snoozing. A ring of fire resistance, an enchanted wooden falcon, and plenty of weapons and shields. The players can take whatever they want from the armoury. If they have a broken dagger, they can replace it. Likewise, if any shields have shattered, or they've lost anything along the way, they can stock up now. The armoury contains the following: bows, both long and short, swords, both long and short, daggers, shields, clubs, axes, pikes and staffs. You'd also find the usual small cannons and cannonballs. I may actually create some of my own weapons to make them more realistic to the Tudor era, but for now this is a D&D friendly version that can easily be looked up. The players can also use the armoury to take a short rest. The Hellhound is only roused if it is directly attacked or when the players try to open the door. During this time, whoever has taken ownership of the Ring of Fire can attune to it. So to leave this room, the players need to rouse the Hellhound. If the Hellhound is roused peacefully, it will just get up, move out of the way and take another nap. If it is kicked awake or attacked, it will attack, so be warned. Now I know in my previous video I was going to include Anne Boleyn's prayer book in the armoury. However, I've decided against that as I have another idea for it, so watch this space. Next I'm going to show how I write this up in some sort of wireframe. In my games, I have a particular set of subheadings I use to make everything clear and easy to follow if someone were to pick this up and play. So at the top I have the scene title. Next we have the introduction. The introduction is a story hook. It helps build a bit of intrigue and sets the tone. It reads, a lonely candle chandelier hangs from the centre of the armoury, and 4 torches flicker in each corner. It's quiet, a little too quiet. The flames reflect on a cold steel door across the room, and gentle snores can be heard from the Hellhound sleeping in front of it. Jonesy's favour rings in the ears of our players, but this is broken by the gentle clink of the door closing. Behind them, not all is as it seems. Where are the guards? Will anyone be waiting for them? After that, I have get set and go. This is a conflict or development of the scene. Here I describe what's in store for the players and establish a narrative for the GM to follow. It is a bullet summary of what I've been explaining in the video. As you can see, it begins with the players entering the armoury and outlines how the encounter with the falcon would work. The last bullet ends with them leaving the armoury, either well rested or battered by a grumpy hellhound. After that, there are subheadings about what the players can expect in the armoury, notes on the falcon, and Anne Boleyn's note copy. I end with resolving the conflict. This question is a way for the GM to clearly close off the scene. So the goal of this armoury scene is to allow the players to rest and get some weapons. Of course there is a bit of peril to keep them on their toes, but the goal is to basically refuel. Have the players done this, or have they irritated the Hellhound and are looking significantly worse for it? Finally, we have bridging the next scene. This moves the GM and players into the next room, or stairwell, as is the case here. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like how I break down how I'm writing my adventure, I have 3 more chapters that I've written and have put them into a playlist. I'll drop the links to all of those in the description. That's all for today, folks, and I'll see you in the next one.